All right, welcome back to the deep dive. You guys sent in quite a few articles about Jay-Z and Beyoncé facing death threats.
Oh, yeah?
So we're going to unpack this whole thing for you today. So basically, the threat started after a lawsuit accusing Jay-Z and Sean Diddy Combs
Ugh.
of a pretty serious crime was dropped.
Mm.
And even though the lawsuit is gone, the fallout is definitely not over.
Not even close.
It's a crazy story, so many twists and turns, some stuff you might not expect. So are you ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
Okay.
The lawsuit itself, filed by a woman identified as Jane Doe, was, well, it was pretty shocking.
Yeah.
She alleged that both Jay-Z and Diddy raped her
Wow.
way back in 2000 after the MTV Music Awards.
Wow.
And she would have been only 13 years old at the time.
Oh my gosh, that's a heavy accusation.
It is, yeah. Heavy stuff. Now,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that the lawsuit was dropped by
Okay.
Jane Doe's attorney, Tony Busby,
Oh, yeah?
back in February. But, the implications of such a serious accusation, even if it's later withdrawn, are huge.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine the weight of something like that hanging over you. Even if it's ultimately dismissed,
Right.
just the stress of it all, especially with family to think about,
Yeah.
it must be awful.
That's where things get even more intense.
Yeah.
Because Jay-Z is claiming that this lawsuit, even though it's been dropped, has seriously damaged his reputation
Right.
and led to death threats
Against
him and his family, yeah.
Okay, so these aren't just vague threats, right? Like, I remember from the articles, there was some pretty specific and disturbing language.
Yeah, exactly. Some of the threats use terms like kill, execute,
Oh, wow.
and even talk about locking him up like Combs in prison, then later in hell,
Gosh.
chilling stuff.
It's scary to think that people feel empowered to say things like that, even if it's online.
It speaks to a broader issue we see with online harassment,
Yeah.
especially for those in the public eye. Because even if these threats never turn into real-world violence,
Right.
the psychological toll they take can be just immense.
Yeah, and think about the impact on their family,
Exactly.
especially their kids.
Yeah.
It's got to be terrifying.
Constant worry, the anxiety,
Yeah.
having to look over your shoulder all the time.
Yeah.
It's not just Jay-Z's reputation on the line here.
Right.
It's his family's safety and their peace of mind.
Absolutely. So how did Jay-Z respond to this? I mean, he didn't just sit back and take it, right?
Oh, no, not at all. He's fighting back
Okay.
on the legal front big time. He's filed a defamation lawsuit
Against?
against Tony Busby, the attorney who represented Jane Doe.
Oh, wow.
This lawsuit accuses Busby of extortion, defamation, and intentionally inflicting emotional distress.
Hold on, sorry to interrupt, but for those of us who aren't lawyers, could you break down what defamation actually means in this context?
Sure. So to prove defamation, Jay-Z has to show that Busby made false statements about him that actually harmed his reputation.
Oh, okay.
And, given the nature of the accusations and all the media attention,
Sure.
that might not be too difficult to do.
So it's not just about proving the statements were false, it's also about proving that they actually caused real damage.
Yeah, exactly. And, to drive that point home, Jay-Z is claiming
What?
a whopping $20 million
Oh my God.
in losses from this whole ordeal.
Really?
Canceled business deals, lost endorsements, the whole 9 yards.
Wow, that's a serious hit, even for someone as rich and famous as him.
Absolutely.
It really makes you think how quickly an accusation, even if it's later dropped,
Right.
can have real-world consequences.
Yeah.
Especially, with the internet and social media, how fast everything spreads.
Exactly. It spreads like wildfire.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And it's not just the financial impact either. The article mentioned that Jay-Z has been subjected to some pretty intense online abuse.
Like what?
Well, he's been called a Satanist,
Okay.
a trafficker, even a monster. There are even reports of racial slurs being used against him.
Oh, that's awful. It's a reminder that the internet can be a real breeding ground for hate.
It can be, yeah.
And, these high-profile figures, they're often the targets.
It's a sad reality, and it's something we really need to talk more about.
Yeah.
Because this type of online hate, it has a ripple effect
Right.
that goes way beyond the individual being targeted.
For sure. We can't ignore the fact that Diddy is also facing some serious legal problems right now.
Right.
Like his own separate thing.
Right, and while his situation is separate from the Jane Doe lawsuit,
Right.
it just adds another layer of complexity to this whole story.
Yeah, it does.
Diddy's currently in jail.
Perfect.
facing a crazy number of lawsuits, over 40, in fact.
Wow, over 40. That's a lot to deal with.
It is, yeah. And what's really intriguing is that many of these lawsuits against Diddy
Yeah.
were filed by the same attorney who represented Jane Doe in the lawsuit against Jay-Z.
Wait, so the same attorney who went after Jay-Z is now going after Diddy?
Tony Busby, that's right.
Now that is interesting. Is there like a potential connection there?
It's definitely something worth considering.
Yeah.
Having the same attorney involved in both cases, both involving these very serious accusations, raises some questions.
It does.
Could this be a coincidence?
Right.
Or is there like a pattern of behavior here?
Right.
It's definitely something for you, the listener, to keep in mind
It is.
as you learn more about this story.
Okay, so to recap what we've uncovered so far.
All right. We've seen how a dismissed lawsuit can still have major consequences.
Yeah, totally.
Jay-Z and Beyoncé are facing these death threats.
Right.
Jay-Z's reputation has obviously taken a hit. There's these financial losses.
Right.
And then Diddy facing his own legal battles.
Exactly.
It's all connected.
But the internet just makes it all so much more complicated, right? Like with how fast information spreads.
Right. It adds a whole other layer.
Yeah, these accusations went viral.
Immediately.
And all that online hate towards Jay-Z is scary.
Yeah. It's a prime example of how things can get out of control so quickly.
Okay, so before we move on, I want to bring up another detail from the articles.
Okay.
Jay-Z claims the timing of this lawsuit wasn't random.
Yo, what do you mean?
He's alleging that Tony Busby strategically filed the lawsuit to coincide with the premiere of his daughter Blue Ivy's film,
Oh, wow.
Mufasa, The Lion King.
Oh, right.
Which, if that's true, it makes you question the motive behind the lawsuit.
For sure.
Like, was it about seeking justice?
Yeah.
Or was there, like, another agenda there?
Makes you wonder.
It does.
Yeah, it definitely speaks to the complexity of these high-profile legal battles.
Right.
There's always more going on behind the scenes.
Right.
And the truth can be hard to find.
Yeah, and even when a lawsuit is dropped, the damage is already done.
That's right.
The accusations, even if they're never proven, can totally destroy someone's reputation and career.
Yeah.
Especially when you add the media and social media to the mix.
Yeah, they amplify everything.
For sure. So what do we do? How do we balance protecting people who come forward with accusations with protecting people from false accusations?
It's a delicate balance, something the legal system struggles with all the time.
Right.
How do we find that balance?
This case really shows just how hard it is.
It really does. It's a story with no easy answer.
Full of twists and turns.
And it leaves us with way more questions than answers.
For sure. So what do you think? What's the big takeaway from all of this?
Well, I think it's the importance of critical thinking.
Right.
Especially today, when information spreads so fast.
Yeah.
We can't just believe everything we read online.
Right. We need to be careful.
We need to think about the source, consider any biases, and avoid jumping to conclusions.
Especially with a case this big.
With high-profile people involved.
Right, exactly.
It's easy to get caught up in the drama.
Totally.
Yeah.
So basically what you're saying is we need to be more skeptical.
Yeah, and we need to be willing to, dig a little deeper, question what we see and hear, look for a deeper understanding.
Because this case is a reminder that accusations, even if they aren't proven, can have huge consequences.
Exactly, even years later.
Yeah, it's not just about Jay-Z and Beyoncé or Diddy.
Right.
This case shows us some big challenges we face as a society.
You're right, it's bigger than just them.
Yeah.
It is.
How do we hold people accountable while also upholding the presumption of innocence?
Right.
How do we protect people from false accusations?
Tough questions.
And then there's the internet.
Yeah.
All this information, true and false, spreading everywhere.
It's a whirlwind out there.
It really is. And it feels like those lines are getting blurred, the line between online and real life.
It's like we're all living in a digital fishbowl now.
Right. Like everyone's watching.
Yeah, exactly.
And social media plays a huge role in all of this.
It really does.
Mm-hmm.
It's changed how we see information, how we form opinions, even how we interact with the justice system.
It's changed everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think this case shows that it does.
Yeah.
It reminds us that the legal system isn't always about finding the absolute truth. It's about presenting evidence, making arguments, and convincing a jury.
Yeah.
And that process, it's messy.
It is.
It's not perfect.
And even when a case is dismissed, it doesn't mean all the questions are answered.
No, not at all.
Or that justice was served.
Right. That's a really important point.
It is.
The legal outcome doesn't always tell the whole story.
Totally.
Or reflect how complex the situation is.
Yeah, in this case, with all the different accounts and all the unanswered questions,
Mm.
it's a good example of that.
It is.
It's messy, there's no clear ending.
Just like real life.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive,
Right.
what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away?
That's a good question.
What's the question they should be asking themselves? It makes you think about, the power dynamics in these situations.
Yeah.
You have Jay-Z, this global icon,
Right.
tons of resources. Right.
He can fight back against these accusations.
He can.
But what about people who don't have that?
Yeah, exactly.
No platform, no money for lawyers.
Yeah, right.
It's like David and Goliath.
You raise a really important point.
Yeah.
Because not everyone can just, file a defamation lawsuit,
Right.
hire a bunch of lawyers to protect their name.
Exactly.
For a lot of people, the damage from a false accusation,
Right.
even if it's never proven,
Yeah.
can be almost impossible to overcome.
It's like that saying, a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And that's even more true now with social media.
Absolutely.
So what do we do? I mean, this case shows how public opinion doesn't always line up with the law.
It doesn't.
You can be totally innocent in court,
Right.
but online, that accusation sticks with you.
It's like a permanent stain.
So what's the biggest question here for our listeners? What should they really be thinking about?
I think the core question is this. How do we balance
Protecting the rights of accusers.
Yeah.
And at the same time, protecting people from potentially damaging accusations,
Right, even false ones.
even false ones.
That's the tough part, right?
It is. There are no easy answers here.
Yeah.
It's a question we as a society need to figure out.
Especially with how much the internet is changing things.
Yeah, the digital landscape is constantly evolving,
It really is.
so we gotta adapt.
It's about finding that balance,
Right.
believing people who come forward,
Yeah,
but also making sure things are fair for the accused.
exactly, because we don't want to silence victims,
Of course not.
but we also don't want to see innocent people's lives ruined.
Absolutely not. And this case is such a good example of how complicated this all is.
It really is.
So many twists and turns, so many unanswered questions.
That's not a simple story.
No, not at all. Well, we've definitely covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
And it's clear this is far from over.
It's a developing story.
So much more to unpack.
As things unfold.
Exactly. But hey, that's what makes deep dives so interesting, right?
Exactly. It's not about giving you all the answers.
Right.
It's about giving you the information and context.
Yeah.
So you can form your own opinions.
Make your own decisions.
That's the goal.
Absolutely. So, as always,
Yeah.
we encourage you to keep learning about this.
Keep digging.
Do your own research.
Form your own conclusions.
That critical thinking is so important these days,
More important than ever.
especially with all the information overload.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
It is. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
And until next time, stay curious.